not a one-way street where you just listen to us. We also listen to you, and as promised, periodically we will highlight interesting comments and react to them here. I'm your host, Elizabeth. Behind the computer screen is Hytham, and we hope that you, our dear viewers, will welcome this exchange of ideas with open arms. In this video, we will cover comments we have received on the following videos: what makes a video game sublime, are video games art, and what went wrong with Far Cry 5. Before starting with the visual letters, I want to thank two of our viewers, Hythin and Brian Rumsey. When our channel stopped posting new content for reasons out of our control, they were here waiting for us to come back. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you Finn, thank you Brian, and now let's jump into the visual letters. First we start with a comment by Drakwiter, who commented on Are Video Games Art? In my Dutch class a few years ago, we were reading an article on this very same topic. The article did also bring up the aspect of interactivity as an argument for games being art, because it is the unique component. The article did also bring up the aspect of interactivity as an argument for games being art, because it is the unique component. My teacher, however, countered this by stating that it isn't a unique aspect of gaming. He argued that interactivity could be seen in every narrative medium because there will always be an active task for the person on a comprehensive and emotional level. He claimed that watching a series like Breaking Bad is as interactive as games because you are constantly trying to follow the story and reacting to it emotionally and morally. Pressing a button or moving a character around isn't interactive, but a dull activity that distracts from true interactivity. I, however, countered this by saying that this is the case in every medium existing. The fact that games can have the same level of interactivity as defined by my teacher is a positive argument for games rather than a negative one. Games can have this common interactivity as all other media, making you actively think and emotionally/morally reflect, thus showing that games can have this aspect common to art. Besides, the interactivity that is often called gameplay in video games is still a unique point to the medium. It differentiates a video game from every other medium, which makes it an artistic medium. For example, at first look, there isn't a big difference between MC Escher's Waterfall and Monument Valley that clearly has been inspired by Escher. They both are interactive because they give the viewer a sense of sublime, the feeling you talked about in another video. However, what differentiates the two works is that Monument Valley has a puzzle mechanic that is genuinely opening a new perspective on these illusions. It is that gameplay that makes Monument Valley art. It is that unique feature that makes video games an artistic medium. I know that the difference between interactivity and gameplay made by my teacher is weird, but I hope I was clear at explaining it. Lastly, I have an example of a game that could be considered art: Undertale. The game doesn't seem to differ much from other fable-like stories as seen in literature and movies, yet Undertale manages to differentiate itself completely from the other media as a game. The turn-based RPG gameplay is outstanding and really makes you feel like a part of the game. Having the choice whether to kill monsters or not makes for multiple playthroughs that don't feel the same. The gameplay is part of the story, EXP and LV, and the story is part of the gameplay. I don't know any other game that uses saves to break the fourth wall. As such, I see Undertale as an artistic video game. Well, Drakwiter, I think you should switch places with your teacher. It's clear to me that the difference between the two of you is that you're someone with skin in a game, someone who knows the medium of video games, while your teacher is theorizing and articulating ideas based on an abstract idea in his mind of what games are. The example you provided of Undertale is a perfect example that refutes all of what your teacher was saying. A game like Undertale is not simply an interactive equivalent of a book where you press buttons instead of flipping a page, but you have an endless amount of possibilities to shape the events of the game. Bosky876 on what makes a video game sublime. Nice video. I like how you've melded Kant's concept of the sublime with the prologue of Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. The Phantom Pain features two quotes from two different philosophers, one from Emile Cioran: "It is no nation we inhabit, but a language. Make no mistake, our native tongue is our true fatherland." And one from Nietzsche: "Facts do not exist, they are only interpretations." I have a question for you. How do these two philosophers work in The Phantom Pain? And do these two philosophers change how you experience the concept of Erhabenheit in the game? Thanks Bosky876. I loved that Metal Gear Solid 5 picked language as its main topic. More specifically, lingua franca. Someone once said that our world is as big as the number of words we know, something I disagree with. Most of the ancient civilizations, Greeks, Romans and Egyptians, didn't have a word for the colour blue, but they knew what it was. They would call it the colour of the sea. We might enter into semiotic territory here, the study of signs, but I see language and words as boxes encapsulating meanings and ideas, and in many cases, they are bad at it. What does a word like beautiful or charming really encapsulate? It's hard to define and to be precise about. Even simple words like chair might not create the exact same image in your brain as the one in your friend's brain. Each culture tries to put its own ideas, thoughts, objects, and expressions into these boxes that we call words. So back to Metal Gear Solid 5. The villain in the game is trying to control words and language, literally, and by that he doesn't just mean controlling the words one would use to talk about, but the thoughts, ideas, and the culture behind them. The story of the Tower of Babel is supposed to be a tragedy, forcing people to speak different languages, but I see it as the best thing that has ever happened to humanity. So, connecting this to Erhabenheit, I see the idea of someone controlling language, words, and the ideas behind them as being as dreadful as any natural disaster. Seeing it from a distance, and at the same time being immersed in the well-crafted story, transformed my dread of someone controlling our culture into a sublime moment. I think the Jeep ride scene will be remembered many years from now as a great example of that.
And the mother tongue of all those codes is hate. The Word became flesh. The final parasite.
About Nietzsche, we've published a video on his ideas about chaos and order. I look forward to hearing your opinion on it. Annotations commented on what went wrong with Far Cry 5. I share the disappointment that Far Cry 5 did not explore cult patterns and history as much as some of the publicity material would have led to believe. Though it's not surprising given Ubisoft's history with showing off expert consultants as an advertising point. See the entire Assassin's Creed series and Splinter Cell games, both of which advertise consulting with historians, field experts, and martial artists. The open-world sandbox structure makes it challenging to create a cohesive story, though it's not an excuse. See Grand Theft Auto 4 and 5, where each sub-story is essentially a near-standalone comical caricature and critique of US urban culture. But Far Cry 5 further misses the mark by missing opportunities in exploring the motives and methods of the cult leaders. Top that with some tasteless moves that carry no consequences, such as the destruction of the giant statue and burning of Joseph Seed's book. I agree that was rather disgusting, and further showed this game really lacked the substance that would elevate a conversation on US culture. Though, I take Far Cry 5 as a sort of self-criticism of Ubisoft and its biggest market, the US. The Far Cry series has distorted and caricatured conflicts and cultures throughout the world, and Far Cry 5 took that lens and put it on the rural US. With that history in the franchise, the publisher/production, and a lack of exploration in the cult leaders of Far Cry 5, it may be disappointing that there's a missing cultural contribution, but no surprise. Overall though, I enjoyed Far Cry 5's cultural acknowledgements scattered throughout the game. I appreciate that the religious spectrum in the game suggests religion itself is not the problem. The stance on guns is rather agnostic, as all sides use them for their own interests. I grew up between rural and urban cultures in the US, and many of the characters reminded me of people I know, feeling the same various levels of respect and cringe. Nick Rye, pilot guy who gets a daughter, was the only character that had any development. Through Nick, conservative values can be celebrated while adapting them to the evolving culture. Thanks Annotations for the time you spent writing your comment. I want to add something that might have gone unnoticed in the video, which is that I enjoyed the game and its mechanics. They were flawless and very well made. It's simply our frustration with the story and the misleading marketing campaign that led us to make the video we made, and as you said, the sandbox open world structure of the game should not be used as an excuse for a bad story. You mentioned the character of Nick Rye in your comment as someone who represents conservative values, and I agree with you that having characters like him in the game was a good choice, but sadly, he ended up only being a decorative piece in a story with no soul. Then and Now commented on what makes a video game sublime. Add something small next to the big object. The opening scene of Star Wars Episode 4 is a great example of the sublime. Awesome video. Thanks Then and Now. Generally, I'm not the biggest of George Lucas fans, but you hit the nail on the head with the example of the opening scene of Star Wars. After many years, the scene still has the impact and the sense of the sublime that it did in 1977. Although the scene was constructed using small toys and simple light tricks, we instantly forget all of this and become immersed in the scene and in awe of the size of the spaceship, which was only clear to us after seeing a small object next to it. Zaratha Astra commented on what makes a video game sublime. Great video, really enjoyed this mix of philosophy and video game analysis. I think Shadow of the Colossus is a great example. The real skill of creating a great video game, or any immersive piece of art, is making the player feel as though they really exist within that world. In that sense, I think Erhabenheit is also a result of the designer's skill in making the moment of awe real and impactful, making the player feel truly invested and absorbed. For me, the best example has to be the Dark Souls Bloodborne games. In Dark Souls, you really get that feeling of fear and insignificance, combined with the undeniable beauty, even if it is a grotesque beauty, that is constantly around you. The lack of a directly presented story in Dark Souls also helps to create the feeling you talked about of the unknown, that what you are experiencing is awesome and powerful and beyond comprehension. To me, that feeling, similar to what Heidegger would call thrownness, is really key to those games. Zaratha, I feel guilty that I haven't played Bloodborne up until now. I always thought of it as a brainless slashing and shooting game, but your comment has made me curious about the Erhabenheit component in it. The good news is that I have it in my PlayStation Plus library and I will try it very soon. Judging from the videos of Bloodborne and Dark Souls, size seems to be characteristic of the opponents in the game. To be honest with you, it had never occurred to me that Dark Souls or Bloodborne could be good examples of the Erhabenheit feeling. But since you're not the only one to mention them in the comments section, there must be something there that I'm missing. Well, that's it for this round of visual letters. We look forward to featuring your comments in future videos, and until then, I, Elizabeth, and my colleague Hytham wish you all the best. See you soon.